So,
Okay. Yeah. Welcome committee members of the community and staff. Please ensure that your devices or cell phones are either switched off or on silent mode whilst this meeting is in progress. If a cell phone interrupts the course of the meeting, we will stop and wait for the device to be muted. This meeting is being held in the supper room, Waimea Centre, Martinborough Town Hall. It is being live streamed and will be available to view on Council's YouTube channel. The emergency exits for this room are the door you came in and the exit behind me. If we need to evacuate the building, please use one of these exits and assemble outside by the playground. Please remain in the assembly area until the building has been confirmed. In the event we experience unruly or intimidating behaviour during the course of the meeting, we will adjourn until it is safe for us to reconvene. Members of the committee and staff will congregate in the office area behind me if this action is necessary. Please, could you stand and join me in the name of the council?
Aruna mai, sasa ia tata kapu. Tatu.
At this point in the meeting, I'd like to inform members of a notice of motion. Item 12.1 will be discussed earlier in the agenda following the confirmation of minutes. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Macaulay and Councillor Maynard and Councillor Alistair will be joining us at some point, but only briefly.
And my apologies from lunchtime.
And your apologies for an early departure. Anybody else? Do I have a mover to accept the apologies, please? Thank you, Councillor Gray, and seconder, Councillor Elams. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. That's carried. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare this morning?
Quite possibly.
No. Do we have any acknowledgements for tributes this morning, please? Don't have any registered public participation this morning, so we will move on to extraordinary business. Moving along. This takes us to the confirmation of minutes, and we do have several things to consider. The first are the Strategy Working Committee meeting minutes from the 16th of April. Do I have any corrections to be made to those minutes, please? Give everyone a moment to just triple check.
I wasn't here for the 16th.
Okay, so everyone
Thank
you. And move again a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Gray. All those in favour that these minutes of the SWC meeting held on the 16th are true, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Motion is carried. The next set of minutes are the Strategy Working Committee meeting minutes from the 30th of April. Any corrections required?
It's been run. From the Māori standing report, it was at the bottom of the first paragraph, the person's name is Hera, H-E-R-A, not Heta.
Thank you, Amy. Perfect. So with that correction in mind, do I have a mover, please, to move? Thank you, Councillor Gray, and a seconder. Councillor Old. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, no. Motion is carried. gosh, we're doing all the minutes. The next lot of minutes are the strategy working committee meeting minutes from the 8th of May. Any corrections from those meeting minutes, please? There are no corrections. We have a mover to move those meeting minutes. Thank you, Councillor Bosley and Councillor Gray for second. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, no. Motion is carried. And finally, we've met quite a lot in recent times. The meeting minutes from the 14th of May.
I'll abstain, I was there.
Thank you. So any corrections from that set of minutes, please? So in that case, I'm looking for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Bosley, and a seconder, Councillor Gray. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The motion is carried. That moves us to the item 12.1, notice of promotion, the future of South Wairarapa Sports and Recreation. And as mentioned, this is an item that has been moved in the agenda. Councillor Gray, you brought this back to the table, and would you like to highlight anything in relation to this motion or the accompanying information?
Yes. So I'd like to say thank you to yourself, Chair, and to the other councillors who supported this motion. I'm going to revoke a decision that was made as part of our deliberations for the long-term plan around how we fund different organisations or entities in the community. As part of those deliberations, we looked at a number of things at the same time, and we were trying to find our way through what was going to be the best way to provide support to these organisations and groups. And I think by discussing the sports and recreation service with those topics, it buried the lead in the process that we had gone through to get to the recommendation to fund the sports and recreation service. So I wanted to be able to bring it back to the table, have another discussion about it, and really highlight that this was a process that has been a long time in the making. It is a need that was identified in the community. It was brought to this table. We then took it to officers to design or to investigate ways that we can support sports and recreation in the district. The officers then engaged with the community and set up a sports and recreation advisory group that had representatives from a number of different types of sports and recreation services in the community, different groups, and worked with that advisory group to come up with, so set up the advisory group. They also sent a survey out to the whole of the community. The survey was widely publicised. There was a breakfast with Olympians present to be able to launch that for the community. We had really good engagement with that survey. The results of that survey were then collated, tested with the advisory group. There was recommendations that came back. So there was a lot of information gathering. That was then, that information collated into some recommendations that was brought back to this council for us to look at. And the council found the group, the councillors who were here, decided to fund it. We decided to support that process, to have a secretariat position funded by the council. The secretariat position is designed to support the work that's happening out in the community. So it's not to replace volunteers, not to do anybody else's job, but to provide support for those groups and to help them to grow and thrive, but also just to survive. The groups highlight how difficult it is to get funding, how difficult it is to coordinate and work together. So an umbrella secretariat position could support the work that they're doing. So we all sat around the table and said, yep, that's a great idea. Let's talk about it when it comes to LTP. And then when it came to LTP, that's where I think it's fallen over, because that's where we've bundled it up with different groups, different organisations that have come to us and asked for MOUs for funding. So the different groups that came to us and asked for MOUs, they're all very good groups. They do good work out in the community, and it's great for them to ask for funding, but that is very much a different process to what the Sports and Recreation Service was about. And I wanted to bring this back to the table mostly because I really like the process that we went through to get to this recommendation. So it was done in partnership with the community, and I think that's a really important thing for us to highlight. This wasn't councillors making the decision, this wasn't officers telling us what to do, this was going out to the community, really asking the questions about what they need, designing an iterative process to get to a good solution. And it had really good engagement and buy-in from members of the community. So I don't play sports. I don't really care about sports that much. But I do really like the way that this was done. I think this was a model that, that's something that we should be looking for all of the engagement that we do out in the community. And I do think that if we ask them to come along on this journey, give us all this information, give us all this time, help us come to this solution, and then at the last minute say, actually, we're not going to fund it, I think that is a massive risk for the council in terms of recreational damage, in terms of wasting the social capital that we have out in the community, and in terms of asking for future engagement or collaboration with the community. It puts all of that at risk. So yeah, I would like us to approve. I would like us to approve operational funding. So it's in the motion, that we approve operational funding of 80,600 per annum for 2025-26 and 2026-27 to facilitate the establishment and delivery of the South Wairarapa Sports and Recreation Service. Thank you.
Well done. Lundberg.
Any further debate? Councillor Olds.
Thanks, Bex, for bringing this back to the table, because I have to say I've always been a supporter of a coordinated approach to sport and recreation across South Wairarapa. In fact, I go back to when Greytown District Trustees Trust funded secretarial service back for Greytown Sport and Leisure, and council engaged Paora Munston at the time, who was their advisor or whatever, to look at the opportunities that we could have in the South Wairarapa in particular, and a coordinated approach to bringing all those sporting bodies on board. Council have an obligation. We own the grounds that these the recreational activities occur on, and we support them in various ways. There is no doubt about that at all. And I've always been of a mindset that we should actually be employing somebody in-house ourselves to do the coordination of our sporting grounds and work with the sporting clubs and assist them where necessary. And I still think that that's probably a good model to look towards. And you've got people in our community like Rosie, for instance, who's been around a while. She knows all the sporting clubs and all the personalities involved in those sporting clubs, and is probably the right person to pick up on that coordinated role. And so for that reason, I guess, and reading through your paper, which is quite detailed, and also the work that's happened, I would certainly support this.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that this is funding for a tender process, so in this there's no guarantee of where that service will end up. So this is funding for a tender.
Sorry, funding for
a tender process.
For a tender process, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I'll pick it.
Councillor, sorry, Mayor Martin.
Yes, well, I will speak forlornly, I suspect, against the motion. Not because I have any particular reason for not, I think, supporting the wider purpose of what is intended here. And I suspect if I was to go into it a bit further, I'd probably be closer to Councillor Old's approach, possibly, partly because I understand it, whereas I'm not even sure what it is I'm buying here, to be honest. And maybe the tender will be sufficiently open, you know, bring us your ideas and we can actually pick and choose from the market. But I think, firstly, it was only at a very recent meeting we voted no to this, and I think it's also a very bad look. It makes the council look as if a couple of people can to us and we sort of flip and what have you. And I think the reason behind the earlier decision that yes, we support it, let's bring it to the LTP to look at, is because the LTP is the place where we look at everything all at once and we make our priorities and we make our decisions at that time. And this is a council that's stretched financially in a community where many, many people are also very stretched financially. And in making our priority decisions at the meeting where we were talking about the LTP and making those decisions, we did not think this had enough priority. And I still agree with that, actually. I've had 2 letters in the last couple of days asking for safety improvements from people who suspect without them there's likely to be another accident and serious injuries and loss of life. And given the choice between doing that and doing this, I would personally prefer it to go on road safety measures. But again, there is no limit to that. I mean, we can all find good causes, etc., that, you know, are crying out for money. I mean, Pukaha just pops up out of the blue in the last week, for example. But we have to show some resolution, I believe, and, you know, trying to keep rates down as low as possible. And unless I can see that there is a particularly urgent value to this particular resolution that doesn't apply to anything else, then more than happy to stick to the decision we made last time, which is here's the amount we think we can afford, the amount we can impose on ratepayers, and if a future council wishes to reflect and decide otherwise, then it can do so. For the meantime, I'm not for doing anything that increases spending without a good value proposition and the confidence that the spending here would be better than spending $80,000 on things like road safety.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Hobley, I have 2 questions that sort of sit with the questions I had when we discussed this last time. One of the arguments against MOUs at deliberations was around the multi-year aspect of that and whether or not it was good practice for the council at the end of its term to make decisions that would then impact funding across a new trade union. And so I just wonder where we sit with that thought in this space, and whether either we are convinced that a 2-year funding round is necessary and good practice, or whether there is an opportunity to look at this for 1 year. which then brings me to my second question, which it sits around the fact that out of the survey, the needs that were highlighted were quite diverse. Facilities, funding, transport, volunteers and governance. How do we set up this new role for success, and what does success look like? Because even if this funding is for 2 years, how does a subsequent council look at this role and know it has been successful, know it has had value, and therefore continue to fund? Because there is little value to the community to fund this role short term, for us not to set it up for success and then for it to be pulled away because subsequent councils have no measure of what value it is bringing to the community. And I don't know if staff can answer at what, and the mayor kind of pointed out, at what point is there more shaping of exactly what this role is, like obviously the information we have says secretariat for this purpose, but at what point do we get to a place where you can start saying, look at them, they're achieving those things that were set out in their KPIs, job description, whatever it might be. And so that's kind of where I'm like, we're a big supportive family. We care about sports. I've managed, I've coached, and spent way too much time running around to practices. But how do I know as a ratepayer or as a councillor making this decision that in 6 months' time, this is having an impact on our community?
How many people are there?
So much to unpack here, and there's so many places you could start this conversation. And so in no particular order, I guess it's there's a number of things that have just been said. I mean, success on this chair, I think, is probably subjective, depending on who you are. I mean, it would be very hard to put a KPI against. Is it the success of the sporting teams? Are they winning medals? Are they winning competitions or trophies? Or is it just, is it?
The items that were brought out of that survey: facilities, funding, transport,
Yeah,
volunteers.
You just asked the question, what does success look like? So I was just replying to that. I mean, it just could be argued that it's subjective, right? But I would think it's probably the level of engagement that comes from that. Seems to me that the mayor is more worried about the optics on this thing, as to what it looks like with, to paraphrase a few councillors not happy with the decision and bringing it back to the table. And I don't think it was about that. I think it was about the fact that we have a license, social license to operate here as a council. And in good faith, we followed a process. We went to our community. We did more than we'd done on other engagements. And we got one of the highest levels of engagement back, and 75% of people that responded to this responded affirmatively, that they wanted something like this. This wasn't to take the place of volunteers, as Councillor Walsh pointed out. This was about supporting those organisations that are already there. And it's not just about Rangiwhai. It's about, there's older groups that need something like this as well. It's not just the cricket club, the hockey club or whatever. There's the other, you could argue the chess club is a sporting club as well. These, it was a really broad cross section of people who said, from schools to sports and organisations, we want this. Some of the organised sports codes weren't even in their season when the survey went out. So they possibly weren't given, I don't know, Matt, the opportunity to engage. It was a very short window of engagement, 2 weeks that went into school holidays. I mean, I also argue a process, but the feedback we got was, I think, was just overwhelming that we have to do this. This was a process. This was a partnership. So for me, I think 80,000 a year, given what we give out in grants each year, both from the community boards, I think is a very small investment, and something that I think will have profound impacts on the wider South Wairarapa community. So I am very much in support of Councillor Gray's. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, could I say, Bex, thanks so much for bringing this back. Well done. I think I'd just like to look at a couple of the things that were raised at the last time we discussed this. And so I'll start off. Colin, you talked about how we've tried this before. And you're absolutely right, we have, back in 2012. And I would take it from there. The situation in our society has changed hugely. Probably the biggest shock that any of us will ever live through. Some people liken it to the Great Depression, some people Second World War. We closed our society down. The results of that have been kids not attending school, a disjointedness in society. We're still suffering through that every day. And when I'm at school as a teacher, I hear about kids not going to school, kids not engaged. So sport and recreation is one of those things that can get those kids back into life, back to part of society. Our society has taken a real shock. And Martin, you might not realise this, but it is a profound impact on it. And, you know, if you've got kids here, you know what I'm talking about because you are hearing it from your schools. Every day the schools will be talking to you saying, how do we get our kids in school? How do we get them engaged? How do we do this? This is something that can lead us down that path. It's something that as a society, it's an investment. It's not a cost, it's an investment. We talk about, you asked the question about success, Melissa. Well, you just have to look back and look at Greytown, for example, in the last 25 years. And this didn't happen overnight. Right now, it has the biggest engagement of sport at primary school in the country. That is not just because sports clubs go off and say, sign up here. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And so that links back to my first point about this is how we can actually get the kids engaged. Talk about consultation. When we talked about consultation here, this is right up there with the 90% of society of our community that said yes to investing in this gym. Again, we like sport, we like engagement, we like these things. We have a person on council whose sole job is to unite our clubs, isn't it, Sid? That's what your job is to bring the communities together, right? And if we say no to this, what are we saying to Sid? We're saying, actually, we don't value that. We don't value that as a society. This is much more than just handing out some money for a club to survive 12 months. This is about turning the page and saying, this is how we're going to engage our young people and our older people into it. And yeah, I know some of the clubs that are predominantly older, and I'll use the Bridge Club. I understand that, you know, you've got a lot of older people in those clubs. They probably don't need this to the same extent that perhaps rugby clubs do. And I'll get onto the thing about the role of volunteers. Volunteers in our sports and recreation clubs are there to encourage the kids, encourage the clubs to work. They're not there to do the administration and the governance and so on and so forth. That takes them away from the very role that we want our volunteers to do. And again, if you go back to schools, it is so hard to get volunteers to do this stuff. And if you say, oh, come and volunteer and be our admin person, well, what do we get at Kuranui, Woody? Bugger all, don't we? Okay, so we see this every day again in our schools, in our communities. And, you know, that's with volunteers, they want to be out there doing this stuff, encouraging, growing the clubs. Administration, boring as batshit. That's not what our volunteers try to do. And then on the consultation, you know, as I said earlier, this is, of all the things, you know, we asked our staff to go out and consult on this. They did exactly what we asked for, and they got a really positive return. Nearly 50% of all the clubs in South Wairarapa responded. I think about 50%, wasn't it? And of that, 85% said, yes, we want this support. That is bigger than any consultation, with the exception of the gym and the Wheels Park, which was largely a community-driven thing. This is the biggest engagement I've had since I've been sitting around this table. And we underestimate that at our period. We need to, you know, we look at our society and we go, boy, we've got some problems. This is one of the things that we can do absolutely as a community, as a council, to say, actually, we're supporting our community. We want to see change. We want to see kids not walking the streets. We want to see kids going to school. We want to see them playing sport. We want to see them growing into the next generation through our clubs and things. And Melissa, you know, I know that the hub in Featherston said no, but look how many of the clubs within that hub said yes.
Mm.
So that tells you perhaps that the hub is not actually telling what their members want. So that's why I would leave this. You know, this is a thing that can make a big change, and I've seen it in Greytown. And Rosie does a fantastic job, and Paula and Dave Butler Peck before that. You know, so we've got 25 years of history of growing this. This is not going to have every club signed up next week. This is not going to have every club signed up next year. but it will take time to grow. And it does grow. We've seen the evidence. We've got the evidence there. Success is, you just have to look at the growth of sport and recreation in Greytown. And I promised I wasn't going to go Greytown, but it is you wanted an example of success? There is a prime example, and there's a good measurement about how this can make a difference. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And the passion is remarkable. And I feel like when I speak, people are like, you're against this. I'm not. What I want to see is that this, if it happens, has longevity. And I'm concerned that if success is subjective, and that if the ask for this one role is now kind of fixing the huge issue that we have with children and administration, the role is continuing.
I didn't say fixing, it said it can contribute to.
It can contribute, but if this is also now an administration role for, it's so much ask, and where do future councils go, actually you've achieved, or do they look and go, we haven't been able to lighten the admin burden for the 100 clubs that we've got. I don't see any extra transport. We've not got more volunteers. I worry we're setting this role up to be too big, and that because there's not currently success parameters, that future councils will find this hard to continue to fund. So I'm looking to our staff to give an indication of where does the design of this role come? Is that part of tender? Is it like someone suggested it will come, I think it's the mayor, that the tender process will actually ask the tenderees to design the role? We have a better idea of what this actually is.
Thank you. So yes, part of a tender process will be setting out what we expect, but then also asking the experts in the field to say what does success look like. So what are the KPIs? We will share the engagement information as part of that in terms of what our clubs have fed back, what they want prioritised, and therefore part of the tender process will be how do you deliver against this? The main challenge we have as a council is this is not our wheelhouse, this is not our expertise. So actually we want to go to the market, to the experts to say, what does this look like? And then part of our tender process is the contract to report back to the council to say, right, you promised this, how have you delivered it? And that should hopefully give councillors and members the confidence that it isn't working. So that's the process.
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't here at the last meeting when this was voted on. But I would like to comment that Melissa just said that people felt you were against it. I've had comments from the public quite disgusted how people come to this meeting on their opinion with predetermination and actually not willing to listen to people talk. Anyway, thanks, Vic, for bringing this back to the table. As far as funding goes for the next triennium, it doesn't matter when you do something like this, there's always a council that's got to deal with it. 2 years, whether that's long enough or too long a term to see if it's going to work, only time will tell. And that's unfortunately that's the time frame that we've got to deal with in this paper, so we've got to accept it. BOS, your subjectiveness, I completely agree with you. A lot of it is subjective. Level of engagement within sports would probably be one parameter you might be able to look at. Grants improved, I think that would be a huge thing for sports clubs, that the grants was one thing a lot of clubs struggle with to get money to come in. If you had someone doing that for them and helping and knowing processes and having access to things would be great. As far as our tender system goes for it, I personally, my preference would be for it to be fully in-house, but unfortunately that's not on the table either. Maybe in the future that's how it will end up. I believe the process of this originally, with the way it went out to the community, was done really, really well.
but I think the presentation that came to council last time was very poor. Facts were sort of missing. The papers didn't seem to illustrate a lot of the facts, like Alistair said 85% of approval, it's actually 95%, not 84. That's huge. We get submissions come here with a couple of percent of people and we decide on it because of that. Well, you've got 95% of people, about 50% of the clubs, and you've got to think it was done over Christmas, where a lot of these volunteers were busy and didn't have time to even get this stuff in, and a lot of them were out of season, so people aren't even really interested in their clubs at that time of year. So if it had been done over a whole year, you might have got 90% of people come back and might have been 99% of approval, who knows. As far as getting kids into sport, it is huge. It's well known that it can reduce vandalism and crime. I speak to this not only as a councillor, but as a parent who's spent quite a few hours running around with kids' sport and helping coach, etc. And it definitely keeps kids entertained, shall we say, and some of the ones that are a little bit more mischief, including my own kids at times, on track. So, this could lead to links with associations like Bush Rugby, Wairarapa Soccer, even Wellington Soccer, with Nicola in full approval of this as well. Soccer, hockey, all those other sports, netball, etc., through not only the South Wairarapa into the Wairarapa and improve things. We've got that gym that Alistair's talking about coming up. Somehow this role could actually be to start getting a little basketball league going, because that's one thing that we're seriously missing, and that is the largest growing sport in New Zealand and has been for a while. There's one other thing I was going to mention. It's gone a bit blank. Yeah, so all in all, I think when it comes down to, that was the other, the whole thing of going through this process and how well it was done. We had the South Wairarapa District Council Sport and Recreation Advisory Group. Now that group strongly approved, supports the council doing this. And I think council staff and councillors should probably listen to that, because they're the ones that have done all the hard work. I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Bex, for pulling this back to the table. But and also I'd like to thank the staff and others who have been involved in the work to the surveys and putting everything together. I think we've got to get away from the discussion about the Gracioun Sports and Leisure Recreation Group. This is going to be a South Wairarapa Sport Recreation Secretariat, isn't it? It's going to be pulling everything together based, I suppose, and starting on the model of Gracioun, which has worked well. But with this paper and the information that we've received up until now, I've got my concerns in that we haven't seen a governance structure. There is a sports advisory group. There is no governance structure. There's no constitution. There's nothing to show how how it's going to proceed and work out. And perhaps it's going to be part of the tender process. But at the moment, there is nothing. If there has been something come through, I apologise that I might have missed it. But my concern is that we need to see a governance structure to demonstrate to councillors and council staff, as well as ratepayers, that this organisation is going to be building and is going to be fair and equitable across the whole district. There needs to be KRA's outcomes from that governance group demonstrated to us, and I would like to see that where we will be going forward, so that there will be no longer a reliance on council for funding. And only if there's only if it's demonstrated that that there's going to be other sources of funding found and used going forward, would then I vote for allowing the 80K funding for the first year. Because I think over the last few years, we've seen so many examples, even just recently, about Pakaha Mount Bruce. Last month we had the Clearville Turf Trust coming to us asking for funding to bail them out. There's plenty of other organisations, whether it's through bad governance or financial challenges or financial mismanagement. You know, last year we had council officers coming to us asking for an increase of funding for the Greyhound Wheels Park. The reliance on the Bank of Ratepayers and the Bank of Council, I think for the collective group of ratepayers across the whole district, we need to start to focus on what is where our essentials. And while a sports and leisure group for the whole district is not, for me, is not a high priority of infrastructure, etc., it's still a priority, but we need to find other ways of finding funding and sources of funding for organisations and groups. But going back to it, I don't see any governance structure. I don't see any KRAs, any outcomes. This is a great report. I think we're halfway there. We need to see more.
Let's respond to something that was just mentioned there. So that was the KRAs and the governance structure and so on. That was never part of the remit of our staff to come up with that at this stage. The issue was go out and see if there's support for this, and they've come back with what's been asked for. So I agree with you, that needs to come, but that was not asked for at this stage.
If we are able to get a governance structure and KRAs and outcomes in a really short period of time, and I don't want to see it for 2 years. I don't want to see us provide funding for a 2-year period of time to go through a whole long drawn out process. I mean, we've got a advisory group already formed. Sure, they're volunteers, but why is it possible to pull an advisory group together and get that work done in a short period of time? Because I'd happily vote to provide funding for a 1-year term, but I don't want to be going forward and forward and forward.
Wrap up a whole bunch of things from everybody here. First thing I wanted to address was a comment from the Mayor around the perceived reputational damage from having received a few emails and then we all flip and make different decisions. Just want to be really clear that me bringing this back to the table, this is from myself. This wasn't any petition from anybody out in the community, and I've been very careful to not engage with people in the community. My feeling on this is that the community's been very clear about what they need, and I think what we have is a governance problem, not a sports problem or a community problem. So this is why I wanted to, bring it back to the decision-making point as opposed to more advocacy. And I hear what you're saying, that the passion from everybody speaking on behalf of sports is great. Cool, sports. But this isn't sports on trial. This is how we function as an organisation. Yes, and also like saying, Aidan, with not yet having the structure or the KPIs or the constitution behind this position, it's I think a chicken and egg thing. We can't build that until we know that we have that. So there's no point in designing a whole structure for how a role would work if we're then not going to fund that role. So that would be the next step, is that if it is funded, that's the next step for the officers to go forward, and that's where it steps out of being governance and back into operational. I do think that one of the KPIs is likely to be around sustainability for funding. I think that if we have somebody in this role operating in this sort of umbrella space and advocating for a number of different groups, they're likely to be able to access a different tier of funding or different mechanisms of funding than disconnected small community groups would be. And so I think that would be a big measure of success, is that yes, we provide the seed funding, we give them 2 years good run up to get going. And I would imagine further down the track, it is self-perpetuating, self-funding because of the nature of that role. So I know it's something that we've talked about here, is that, yeah, people coming to the Bank of Council. But what we do want is to be an organisation that facilitates. Like, we don't do everything ourselves, but we can help others to do for themselves. And that's very much what this role would be. And then the other thing, just to walk back again to another comment from the Mayor, around wanting to keep the rates down, or keeping the rates within reasonable amounts. And if we were going to be funding health and safety stuff, is this what we would want to be funding? And I think very, very much, yes, this is something that we would want to be funding from a health and safety point of view. I can't think of much better return on investment in terms of the health and wellness space than sports and recreation. From a physical health point of view, from a mental health point of view, from building the community, I think this small amount of money is an incredible opportunity to invest in health and wellness. Yeah, I think that was the main points that I wanted to make with that. But yeah, just to bring it back to the fact that this is, yeah, it's not sports on trial here. This is, I hear what you're saying, but you do like sports. But, and as somebody who is very in touch with the community, I know, speaking directly to you here, Deputy Mayor, that I know that all the decisions that you make have the best intentions for the community at heart. And so what you're looking at here is not whether or not sports is good for the community, it's whether or not this position, this funding is the right thing to be able to unlock the service. And it's not without risk. And I don't think that the officers have ever said that it's totally going to be easy from here and not have any risk. There are possibilities or ways that this might not work out, but we won't know those if we don't at least give it a try. And I think we can already say, where we are at the moment, that sports and rec in the community is already massively at risk, that there's less people to do a lot more work, there's a lot less funding. So this is a way of mitigating some of that risk that already exists. I think that's it.
We from our CE, and then we will go to the vote.
It's been mentioned already that this is not a given, that this is Greytown Sports and Leisure. I think that's been mentioned several times. I would ask council to consider, if this motion is approved, that there needs to be some supplementary resolutions passed around funding for Greytown Sports and Leisure. The funding that you approved through the EAP process expires on the 30th of June. And I think there is an expectation that this would be an open expression of interest that may or may not be attractive to Greytown Sports and Leisure. But if the funding isn't there to support that entity to make a bid, then I think we've got a gap that may not have been thought through. So I do have a couple of resolutions that would seek to give continued support to Greytown Sports and Leisure on a monthly basis, if you decide to go ahead with that. But at this point, I just want to make it clear that there is a consequence that you may need to consider after you've made your decision.
To be clear, would that monthly allowance come out
Out
of
of
this?
the resolution would be that we would draw on the 80,000 if you approve it to fund the monthly cycle for Greytown Sports and Leisure, so that they're not disenfranchised from the ability to bid for the EO.
Monthly ongoing funding would stop when the EOI process is
Completed, yes.
So there would be a continuity of the service that already exists.
Whilst the EOI process was continuing through to conclusion,
Yep.
and then that obviously will switch over to funding that role because that's what the intent is. I'm just nervous that your existing funding expires on the 30th of June and we don't have a stopgap for that in the budget.
How does that work in term, because the motion is for funding in the next LTP? So that's a separate thing to this.
This would be an amendment to the resolution, but I can't.
So the current funding finishes June 30. This funding would arguably start 1 July, subject to an EOI situation. So what Janice is suggesting is that the 80,600 would monthly be deducted by X amount to continue to allow continuity of service until such times as the EOI is completed.
I'm quite comfortable with it.
Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Woodcock.
Just a bit of clarity around previous funding of Greytown Sport and Leisure, and I guess that we go back to Greytown District Trustees Trust because they funded Greytown Sport and Leisure right up until a couple of years ago, prior to this council being elected in here, and then they withdrew their funding, and obviously that's why Greytown Sport and Leisure have had to come to us effectively to seek out some funding, and likewise we have granted some funding to carry on the existing model. Greytown District Trustees Trust have no future interest in supporting a model, or is it?
That's a question we can't answer. Obviously, the position for the EAP that was brought to the table was that their funding would cease. And you resolved to allocate $60,000 to replace that funding for 1 year on the basis that we went through this process.
Yeah, so one of the things that came out of Greytown District Trustees Trust failing to, not continuing the funding was to look at opening it up to a greater South Wairarapa sport and recreational, etc. thing. And I guess that's where we're in today. This is the situation we're in today. So we continue to fund Greytown sport and recreation in a moderate sense, do we not at the moment, up until?
But they have.
I just want to get some clarity around.
As of the last EAP, feels uncomfortable to be talking about a particular organisation.
I'm really uncomfortable with this. I feel we're starting to bring Greytown Sport and Leisure into this debate, and it should, we've already argued that it's actually not part of the debate. It's a separate thing. And I get your point, John.
This is not about whether
The
this is
organisation.
or not. This is about the ability of the entity to continue to function to put in an EOI.
Totally hear you on that. I just feel that the words Greytown Sport and Leisure get certain passions rising in this around this table, and that becomes the object of discussion rather than your point.
What we're looking for. This, I think we need to be very clear about what
Absolutely.
this discussion is. This discussion is about a interim funding for an existing organisation.
Out of the funding,
Out of this funding. So what we're looking for is an amendment that says that it's not a debate around any other. It's just that question.
I get that.
I wanted to get some clarity around existing funding arrangements and this current funding arrangement. That for me is important.
And as of this very minute, ends for June.
Okay.
So Councillor Woodcock and Beacon.
Thanks, Chair. So Janice, can you tell us what's a realistic timeframe to put tenders out and get expressions of interest, etc., and get this thing rolling? Is it a month, 2 months, 3 months?
I
suppose that will also depend on council feedback in terms of how close you want to be in terms of approving KPIs process, etc. But also like a full tender process potentially around 3 months. If you want to condense that, then that could be reduced obviously down to 2 months, 6 weeks, whatever, depending on how much due diligence you have in the process. The original plan was potentially to bring an update to this committee of what that might look like if it had been approved at LTV DLIBs. It wasn't approved at DLIBs, so we put that work on hold for now. So subject to instruction today, we can then bring something to a future strategy work committee laying out our approved process, or just get our heads on and do it. So it will depend on what councillors want to see in terms of that level of due diligence. The full tender, you're looking at 3 months.
Because ideally, we'd like to get it sooner rather than later, but we don't want to rush it and do it wrong. And but you know more than we do about workload for staff, etc., and whether we can prioritise this, or is the other things that have got priority over it. That's
I'd leave that in Matt's hands. This is something that sits in his team. He knows his workload.
Make it work. If we get the instruction on this is a priority for members, we make it work.
that's cool. Thanks, mate.
Well, I've got 2 comments. Firstly, if we did approve some sort of amendment such as this, I think it should be just to keep faith with what I think is the purpose. It should be restricted to a reasonable length of time, such as 2 months, maybe, however long we would expect it would take an organisation that's existing to get in a fully fledged tender. But equally, I also suspect we have to contemplate what would happen if there's another organisation in the district that's not funded by us that says we too would like to put in a fully fledged tender, and we need to acquire some resource and, you know, consultant for 3 weeks to do it. Are we going to fund that as well? Question mark. Because otherwise it's not clear to me what the reason is for funding this one. I mean, other than we have done it previously, but not sure that that's a good reason for continuing it here without giving other organisations up for the task an equal opportunity.
To my mind, that interim funding isn't necessarily for the purpose of being able to tender. It is to provide an interim service while the while the tender process takes place.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we seem to be losing focus of the first thing that's on the table. And the first thing on the table is let's get a vote and say, are we going with this? And then we can talk about the consequential issues that may be, because otherwise it's not fit.
Through the chair, what I'm saying is there are some consequences to that funding ending.
And there are some other consequences that I'll bring up depending on the vote, but I'd rather find out which way this is going first.
With that in mind, I'm looking for a mover. I suspect it will be Councillor Gray to revoke resolution SWC 2025/79 for the South Wairarapa Sports and Recreation Service, and 2, approve operational funding of 80,600 per annum for 2025-26 and 26-27 to facilitate the establishment and delivery of a South Wairarapa Sports Recreation Service. Second, thank you, Councillor Plummer. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no.
No.
Yes, that's, Councillor Evans and Emma against. The resolution is carried. Our job here is not done. Now we need to make a decision on the consequences of that decision and how we fund.
So the Genesis one, can I bring up another one which is linked to that as well? When we said no to this, the last meeting, we then had a consequential amendment and said, let's put $80,000 grants fund as a result of largely the decision that we made to say no to sport measure. That $80,000 has been voted on to be in the grants fund. I suggest we need to take that out of it.
I would argue that the decision to put 80,000 into the grants funding was a consequence of all of the MOU requests and actually not based on this decision at all. That's my feeling.
I agree with that, yeah.
I mean, we can put it to an amendment, we can put it to a resolution, put it to a vote, but my,
That's what I mean, to make sure everybody understands then that what we've done now.
A point of order, thanks, President. I don't believe it can be put to the meeting. We have rules around how you reverse previous decisions. This would be a reversal and it would be completely against the rules.
which brings us to the resolution that you've brought up. Do you have suggested
The suggested wording is to approve to fund Great Town Sports and Leisure £5,000 per month until the South Wairarapa Sports and Recreation Service is established to retain the existing service level for clubs in South Wairarapa. Note that the funding of £5,000 per month will come from the £80,600 per annum funding for the Wairarapa Sports and Recreation Service.
So this is beyond, this is funding beyond the expiry date of the.
Yep, the current funding arrangement.
1 July until the experience first.
Yes.
Processes.
So we have to put a time limit on that, but otherwise it'll just roll over forever and ever. So.
I think I'd be comfortable in some sort of time. Put to that 3 months.
So I guess, did you link it to the outcome of the study?
Approve funding for Great Town Sports and Leisure $5,000 per month until the South Wairarapa Sports and Recreation Service is established to retain the existing service level for clubs in South Wairarapa.
There's a timeframe.
Yeah.
How long was it, sorry, Miss? For what timeframe?
It just says until it's
Until it's
established.
created, until it's established.
So that's not actually even not attached to the tender process. That's attached to establishment of a new.
Matt's already given an indication that process could be 3 months.
No, the tender process could be 3 months.
It could be amended to say 5,000 per month for a maximum of 3 months or until the South Wairarapa Sports and Leisure is established.
I'd be happy with
If you're wanting a constraint.
It will have it better.
that.
I'm happy to move that resolution.
Second.
Councillor Gray is happy to second that resolution. All those in favour of the resolution that Janice has just read several times now, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. So Elams, the motion is carried.
Another question.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Councillor Gray, for bringing the item back to the table. Thank you for the passionate and robust debate.
Thank you, Chair.
I also just very quickly say a big thank you to the staff for the advice that they have given around the service and also to the advice from Janice and Amy for how to formulate this as a decision-making tool.
Thank you. Right, we are.
And Chair, I'm going to leave.
Yeah, Good luck.
A lot of the stuff like that.
Behind time. So we will carry on. The next item on the agenda, because we've had a bit of a move around, is matters arising from previous minutes. Any matters arising from previous minutes that we've previously. Moving. Right, so we're now moving into report back and updates from the Māori Standing Committee and Community Boards. This is the part where they are able to come to us, not the bit where councillors do their bit. So I'm of the understanding that none have been received for this meeting.
I can do a quick verbal.
That comes at the end. Yeah, so two separate bits. One is for our community boards to come to us, or Māori Standing Committee, and the second bit is for us to report back. So that bit will come later. Decision report from the Chief Executive and staff. Item 10.1, the South Wairarapa District Council's membership of Local Government New Zealand. We have the lovely Mr. Gardner and Dennis take us through the report and highlight the key points for discussion. Other councils has become extraordinarily political, and I would hope that we can have a discussion around this table without kind of filtering off into the distance of sticking decision. So I'll leave it to you two.
Morning, councillors. Pleasure as always.
So I've obviously brought this paper to the table for the very reasons that the chair has just highlighted. It's we wanted to do so with a reminder as to the ongoing conversations across local government in New Zealand, in particular around the value or perceived value that LGNZ membership may or may not bring to our organisation. The role of LGNZ, well, is multifaceted, and for an organisation such as ours, it certainly has strong perceived value in some areas and less so in other areas. That said, the papers before you, and as you will see from the recommendations, the renewal of membership of LGNZ has already been factored into budgets, both in terms of the current annual subscription period and the LTP one as well. I would touch on one particular area of importance that I feel needs highlighting, and that's obviously the fact that we're going into a new election cycle. The LGNZ offer an immense amount of, in officers' views, an immense amount of value to an organisation of our size in respect of specialist advice and support. To be able to rely on them to reflect the wider views of local government nationally. We are one of the smaller councils in the country, and so to have that insight is incredibly valuable, but also particularly from an advocacy point of view. And from an officer's perspective and a councillor's perspective, of course, provides a conduit into local government nationally as well, around networking, collaboration, policy decisions, opportunities to influence, so on and so forth. And of course, there is the very significant initiative around the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, which forms part and parcel of what we feel is a key area of value for a council of our size. So with those things in mind, and obviously I won't read verbatim what's in the paper, it is officers' recommendation that we continue with the renewal of LGNZ to the value that's outlined within the recommendation. I would point out as well that our governance structure actually does influence somewhat the subscription amount because we have community boards. So it is, but that's just as a result of how we're structured. But those same resources are available to our community boards as what they are to this table as well. So the value in our view is actually quite wide-reaching. And I'll invite any questions.
Thank you. I'll just put one to kick us off. Thank you, Councillor Bosley, and then Mr. Mayor, and then I'll have a we'll carry on.
So actually, I didn't have any questions until your last sentence, really, which was the community boards cost us money for this. How much? What's the contribution?
Well, I mean, it's indicative, but it's in the region of about $6,000 of the overall subscription amount per annum that's associated with the community boards.
Because essentially we have a bigger governance
structure.
It's able to access the same levels of information, advocacy and education that this table is able to. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I just endorse just about everything that Paul said. In fact, I thought once we put it in the budget of the LPP that actually we were agreeing to it because we had quite a long discussion at that point about whether we thought it gave value for money. So I was a bit surprised to see this on the table.
Through you, Chair, and just in response to the Mayor's comment, indeed, but it was because of the momentum across other councils that we just wanted to kind of sense check that, and there is an overlap within the subscription periods as well, don't automatically align with what our annual budget period is, hence the reason why we're bringing it back.
Thank you. I too am in support of continuing our LGNZ subscription membership. I think the level of support, advice, education and advocacy warrants it, particularly in times of change. We are approaching an election cycle. We are approaching change to our governance structure. We are staring down the barrel of referendum and a host of other changes. And I think it's good to maintain our current position. Lily?
We'll hand up first.
Ladies first.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add my voice in support of remaining with LGNZ. As a new councillor, I found the networking opportunities through the annual conferences incredible. I found them very, very valuable, and also the education that we can access through is it's not really anywhere else you can get that. And I think as we go through an election cycle, the next council that will be coming in, there will be a lot of new faces around the table again. And I think it would be very short-sighted of these people around the table disadvantaging the next lot of people who will be around the table and not having them have access to the same facilities. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'm certainly vote to approve this recommendation. I'll just speak, Paul, you mentioned about the access that community boards have to LGNZ, and certainly from my perspective, my first term, my term on the community board, the induction that we did with that LGNZ ran for specifically for community boards was hugely beneficial. I'm disappointed that our current community boards didn't undertake that same induction, and I would certainly like to ensure that at the start of the next triennium we utilise all the facilities that LGNZ provide to induct not only new community board members but new councillors into the role, into this governance role, because it is, as we all know, it's a role which is unlike any other role within our communities, and we need to ensure that the people sitting both around the community board table and also this council table are on board, inducted and on board as quick as possible. So I'm more than supportive of the work that LGNZ does towards.
Councillor Mosley.
Oh, I was going to say, I just endorse what Councillor Emmons just said, and I think that, we're far better together as a collegial organisation than trying to go it alone. And I think LGNZ does have some failings. I think overall it's a great benefit.
Councillor Old, and then we'll move to.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I'm just going to reinforce what everybody else has said, because the reality is from 2013 till now is the changes that we've seen in the way that local government functions and the way that we operate as a council are quite significant from those early days up till now, and early days from being 2013 at early. But to me, the key has been that we've been kept abreast of these changes through our contacts within Local Government New Zealand, not only as an organisation, but the opportunity to network with our council colleagues right across New Zealand. And to me, I always reinforce Royal and Provincial as probably being one of the key conferences or meeting sessions that we go to, where we have that opportunity to network. Get up conferences alone are valuable as well. So yeah, it's a no-brainer in my view. And with an election coming up, I would hope that our new elected councillors embrace it in the same way that I have over my time.
Cox, sorry, so totally blank. Councillor Woodcock,
Bad day. Easy to do. Yeah, I'm in two minds about Local Government New Zealand. I understand they give us funding. We probably, well, not funding, but we probably get more back from them than we fund them. But I believe too politicalised, and they're not a neutral entity, which I believe they should be completely neutral and stuff like that, but, in saying that, like I say, they do bring a lot to the table for us, so, yeah, I think it's probably on the best interest to, bring it in and let the next council decide what they want to do.
Fantastic. Right, with that in mind, looking for a mover to move all five. One, see the South Wairarapa District Council's membership of Local Government New Zealand report, approve the renewal of council's membership of LGNZ and payment of the invoice annual subscription for 25-26 of $40,443.58 plus cost. Notes that should a commitment to membership be made, then subscriptions will continue to be paid throughout the term of the LTP unless directed otherwise, and that's the fields already in the LTP. Notice that the cost for the current year's membership or membership of Local Government New Zealand have been included in the enhanced annual plan. Australia was right. Notes that the cost of ongoing membership of Local Government New Zealand has been included in the LTP 2025-24 budgets. Thank Councillor Gray, who had her hand up first for moving, and then Councillor Oles was the seconder. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Motion is carried.
Take a 5-minute break at some stage, or we're just getting.
We do have a Local Government New Zealand annual general meeting 2025 registration, but I think we'll take a very quick and concise 5-minute comfort break and then return.
Nomination.
Go through those.
Thank you and welcome everyone. We are now moving to item 2.2 in the agenda, Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting 2025 registration. Again, Paul and Janice will take us through the report and highlight the key points for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it brief. The second report was read. As the paper states, the LGNZ annual AGM is being held on the 16th of July. The number of votes and number of delegates that we get to send to the AGM is based on our subscription. So we're entitled to 3 votes and 3 delegates, and we must assign a presiding delegate to vote on behalf of council's interests. The members of this committee will be asked to endorse and prioritise the remits that will be voted on by the presiding delegate of the Strategy Working Committee on the 6th of July. And invite any questions.
Fantastic. Mr. Demir.
Customarily, we have, to the AGM, we've had 2 councillors and 1 staff member. Traditionally, that staff member has been CE or acting CE. But I understand that Dennis may not be attending, but Russell may be, so I would nominate Russell as one of those people to deputise for Dennis. Unless I've got the story wrong, of course.
And the delegates need to be physically attending the AGM as well. So I understand that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that is yourself, Martin, Colin. We've got anybody else intending to attend the AGM?
Not that we're aware of.
So then naturally it stands that the delegates would be the Mayor, Colin, Russell is our 3 attendees.
Looking for a nod from Russell.
Yes, yeah, so we're just looking then for the presiding, from those 3, the presiding, and then the 2 supplementary delegates. Yes, is that how this works?
I suggest that we would nominate Colin as the presiding.
I'll support that.
Yeah,
Colin,
so Tina,
Reckon.
cool, and then yourself.
Christchurch.
Is the 2
Mhm.
further.
It's fine.
Wonderful.
It's not, you don't have to, if others don't take their CE into that space, you don't have to do that. It'd just be the two.
You just have to be.
Delegates, yeah.
That's what it costs the council to send people in. Does it cost us anything or is it all?
The attendance,
There's a registration fee for
the registration fee.
conference.
All conference tours.
Yeah.
But the AGM itself is based on your subscription, so there's no fee for attending the AGM itself.
You have to get that.
To get,
But yeah, it is.
What does it cost us all up for flights, accommodation, everything we've got to pay?
Oh, go on.
I personally I don't think we should be sending anyone at the end of the triennium. We're sending people that aren't going to be here next year. Unless you can guarantee me there's someone here that's going to be here next year that can go. I personally don't see a point in it.
Well made, this is about this council's ability to vote on remits that will impact potentially this area and this council moving forward. So I agree, it is toward the end of the training, which is unfortunate, but without having people there, this council will have no voice.
They don't.
Well, if only one person can vote, why aren't we just sending one person?
well,
For you, on Chair, general speaking, because these people would be at the conference in any case. So the AGM is generally bolted onto the conference, so you don't get new people having to travel in and incur additional expenses.
Here's the point of having a presiding delegate and extra delegate is if Colin fell over and broke his ankle and couldn't be there, then the mayor is also already registered to be able to have our votes on our behalf.
Correct.
So it's because it is a formal AGM, you can't just rock on in and have any old person do your voting. It's all registered well in advance.
I was going to say that, are you really serious, councillor? I mean, it's an election. Nobody is guaranteed to be.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We're actually sending people that aren't even running.
You
next time.
council can appoint you, Bex.
People that were going to run next time
You have to
might be here.
going in order to, and have the interest and the willingness to represent the council. So I don't think that matters whether you come to that in the future or not. Also, 2 years ago,
You've been somewhere else.
conference was held in Christchurch, so it shouldn't be difficult to find out what the cost 2 years ago was. It's it'd be cheaper than if it was in Auckland.
To live there now.
Unless anyone has anything pressing to say, I'm suggesting that we look to have a mover to nominate Colin to represent South Wellington District Council as the local government New Zealand annual general meeting 2025 presiding delegate, and nominate Martin and Russell to represent South Wellington District Council at the local government New Zealand annual general meeting 2025 as delegates.
Right.
Thank you. You're going to put that Violet and councillor Easlams to second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. The motion is carried. In the spirit of appointing people to things, we are now moving to 10.3, the trustee appointment to Wairarapa 5 Towns Trail Trust. And we have, oh, you're already here.
Just.
Fancy that.
Give me a seat, Lloyd.
Yes, as part of the submission for deliberations from the Wairarapa 5 Towns Trails Trust, there was a suggestion, a request in fact, to consider an appointment from the council table to the trust board. During deliberations, as everybody will be aware, councillors voted not to commit to forming any formal MOUs. But it did leave this issue of a potential appointment still sitting and needing to be voted on. So it's still an outstanding issue. Council officers have obviously reviewed and considered what we may want to, or what recommendation we may want to bring, and in the spirit of continuing with the decision that this table made in terms of MOUs, it's our recommendation not to appoint, because it may be seen as being taking a different direction towards the intent around MOUs in the first place that was made during deliberations. That, of course, is with your good selves to decide upon. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I was, interested in the recommendation. And in a sense, I congratulate the writers. I think it does give us cause to stop and think about a decision which possibly under different circumstances might have almost been an automatic, let us not even think about it. But I wonder if there isn't another reason to avoid it as well, which doesn't get a mention here, which is that the in this day and age, to be a trustee on a trust actually has a very, very significant responsibility attached to it. I mean, it's one of the few roles that any of us might find ourselves involved in, where if we make a careless decision, as opposed to a bad one, if we make a careless decision, we could well find the Attorney General issuing proceedings against us. And in this case, if we have nominated somebody who in some way is sitting there with that level of responsibility, what is actually the residual responsibility on the council? As we said to whoever, you know, we want you to be our representative slash trustee. It's not like, if you like, some other bodies where your liability is restricted to what the value of that entity is. This is to some extent saying to somebody from here, you have to go and represent us with actually a considerable liability attached to it if that body makes a careless decision, etc. And I wonder if that actually isn't almost a more pressing reason for us to think about the issue almost as a matter of principle for the council. What level do we want to expose, in fact, anybody to, whether or not we were funding it or otherwise? And I mean, for example, if we had somebody potentially on the Carhart Trust, are we shortly looking at a bill coming to us presenting a fifth of $600,000? It seems to me those are the considerations which need to underlie any recommendation to a trust, as opposed to some other bodies.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Chair, just to touch on the Mayor's point, page 9 of the trustee talks about liability of trustees. And the Mayor raises a very valid point, because whilst the legal liability is one thing, the reputational liability is quite separate to that. So whilst the trustees won't be personally liable, as 11.1 stipulates, due to a breach of trust arising that trustees dishonesty, willful misconduct or gross negligence, there is through the appointment process, there is that potential for reputational association with any decisions or any kind of direction that is taken. So it is a very valid point. The other point, of course, is 11.3 of page 9 talks about insurance for trustees. If I may, having been on the board of a not-for-profit organisation myself, professional liability insurance doesn't exclude if there's actually been some kind of legal issue that's arisen outside of the law. So this is normal trust kind of items that have been included in this trustee, but the reputational side of it through association is probably something that needs to be considered by this table.
Councillor Olds.
Thanks for that. And thanks for highlighting some of those areas of concern, Paul. Firstly, I've been involved in the trust or the Warwick Five Towns Trails, I guess, since its inception. Both Greg Lang and myself were sort of instrumental in getting a lot of the business done in those early days, although I took a back seat. Big had more energy than I did in formulating it and getting it up and running. I can completely understand both the comments of the Mayor and Paul as well. And I think when I was approached to be asked if I'd be keen to be a representative on the trust, the South Wairarapa rep, really towards the end of the triennium, I really couldn't see the benefits, because there is no strength in being a trustee, for instance, if you are not seeking re-election or if you're not part of this organisation. And to me, a South Wairarapa representative outside council doesn't carry the same degree of weight as it does as if you are a council. If they asked me as an individual to be a trustee, I'd seriously consider it. But as a representative, and given that we are coming up to the end of a triennium, I really feel that it's probably in the best interest that we this come back to the table for conversation in the new triennium with the new council. That's my personal view.
We've got any wild debate against the resolutions, I think, and I'm not sensing that. I think we can continue on, and I'm looking for a mover, please, to receive the trustee appointment to Wairarapa Five Town Trails Trust report, and to resolve not to appoint a member of council to the Wairarapa Five Town Trails Trust at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Violet, as our seconder. Those in favour, please say aye. No, the motion is carried. Thank you all. We will now consider item 10.4, the updates to standing orders report. I think we can do all of it before lunch, Amy. I don't think we're going to argue too badly about these minor amendments. Who's taking us through this report?
Amy, yes, I
Miss
think
Amy. Amazing.
Gosh, it's about to read. Absolutely. Please don't go.
And if you could just highlight some of the.
Try to keep my, you want to keep your eyes open.
So, Taitoa, and LGNZ that have gone through the standing orders templates. They get reviewed every couple of years, and the latest versions come out with some simplified language. The last template was a little bit busy visually. There was Te headings put in, but the formatting in the last one didn't really, wasn't very attractive and kind of very crowded. So the formatting's been changed, language has been simplified, so it's a little less legalese, so, you know, a little bit easier for, you know, a wide audience to understand. We've also got some recent legislative changes, not too recent, because last year there was the change around quorum and being online. You can now hold a meeting, a formal meeting purely online, whereas before that wasn't possible. But through COVID and all those changes around meeting online have been solidified in legislation now, so that's been updated. There's also a couple of other changes around emergency meetings. So following an election, you have the ability, the CE now has the ability to call an emergency meeting before declarations are made by elected members. So the candidates elect would be able to come in, you know, God forbid there was something that urgent, an emergency, but it's there if it's needed. And the principles have also been updated in the very beginning of the document as well. So that's just strengthening the principles. I think that pretty much covers everything. And also just to note that the public forum is a little different in our template. So that's also been updated to reflect what we had in the last amendment from July last year. So nothing has changed, so people can have feelings around that.
Any comment on what is largely just processing, updating? I see. This is largely just a process. It's not anything specific to this.
Yeah, now look, I shall start by confessing that I have not read the standing orders thoroughly. One of the things I was looking for, which I didn't find and I haven't had time to come back to, was the issue of attendance online. I know that there are a number of councils and mayors who are concerned about what they see as a growing tendency for people to be online, but to turn their cameras off. Now, the risk with that is the rest of the meeting cannot see whether or not that person is actually the person who's, if you like, got a gun to their head and being forced to vote in particular ways. Not even see whether they're even illiterate. And I understand it's usually in these situations, the chair asks them to turn their camera on so that we can check, but that apparently there's nothing in the convention standing orders to say that they have to. And
I know the councils have recently changed their standing orders to make it the cameras have to be on.
yes,
Otherwise, it's not not considered to be.
Attending.
And attendance.
Yes.
unless we do it when we've got the chance
Yeah,
to,
now.
we may find that we're
We do that at the iwi too. The camera's got to be on.
There's nothing in there specifically, like, I can see it on the cameras, but if you would like something in there that says you need to have action on.
So I'd be suggesting that we
So-
13.7 to note that attending online, has to have the camera on during.
There's 13.11 conditions for attending by audio visual link, page 49. I haven't read that yet.
State you did again.
Yeah.
I think that should be in there.
If it's accepted, but it doesn't say have it on.
It's a physical presence.
We should just, make sure people attend meetings, not offline.
Well, I think many people would agree.
Things online. Have your camera on.
But sometimes
I do recall you coming on doing the
Camera.
we're in Australia, and I think that was a valuable,
You're absolutely right. I agree. Yeah. For those circumstances.
it's something that can be done in this day and age.
Just looking for the.
Strictly rules.
I would suggest that it be the amendment include at the direction of.
Yeah, we get it. Get it.
Because I didn't, I think I can think of at least one
Also remember the chairperson should do that, please.
technology failed us and the person had to come in
Yeah, person remains.
fashion telephone.
Telephone, yeah.
I don't think anybody saw any problems with that at the time, but
So the bottom number 3 here, that delegates authority to the CE for minor edits, would that come under that to make sure that goes in there? Is that?
No, it should be added in.
not sure that's a minor.
Yeah.
One minor, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd be,
Thing of the seven.
I'd be suggesting.
Where it actually goes in the paper.
I'd be suggesting that, resolution number 2, adopt the amended standing orders 2025 for the conduct of its meetings and those of its committees, including community boards, with the amendment to item 13.7 to note that, attending an absence, you must have your camera on.
It's at all times.
Yeah, or at the direction of the chair.
You won't be
Um,
rude.
Looking for a mover. Councillor Bodley, Councillor Gray to second. So we are moving to receive the updates to standing orders report, adopting the amended standing orders 2025 for the conduct of its meetings and those of its committees, with the amendment to 13.7 to note that the camera needs to be on if you're attending remotely. Delegate authority to the chief executive to approve minor edits to the amended standing orders 2025 prior to publication. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Motion is carried.
So just to go back to that, at the end of recommendation 2, it says 4.
Yes, sorry, you did need to read.
It's just 1 and 2. Oh, efficient. Always doing that little bit extra.
Let's see, above and beyond.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. That brings us to item 11.1, our information reports from Destination Wairarapa, your quarterly reporting. Thank you for waiting. We are now about 15 minutes behind. Welcome in.
Thank you for having me this quarter. It was a delight to sit in front of you and talk tourism. Look, I'll take the report as read, give you a few points from it. Domestic tourism, as you see, is still very soft across the country. That has been continuing, and it is largely due to economic conditions that the whole of New Zealand is experiencing. Our decline, I guess, in the month reported wasn't as large as New Zealand, so I guess you can take some, not joy isn't the right word, some comfort in that we're no worse than anyone else and slightly better than the average in the country. The highlight, however, was that we are number 1 in the growth of international tourism for the month that we were reporting on. Of a very small base, I understand that. However, to be number 1 in any MB reporting, I'm going to take as a see that in the data, which is shared throughout New Zealand and the media outlets and all the rest of it. is pretty exciting, not just because of what we are doing, but also that our name, Wairarapa, is seen around the country as a place that is serious about tourism and serious about international tourism. Which brings me to my next point, I guess, is that is an indicator of where we should be spending more time, which we are. International tourists stay longer, they spend more. We want them to engage with our community because it makes our lives richer. So it's not just an economic benefit that we're achieving from those people coming through our region. We get to meet them and understand their part of the world as well. We have a great deal of success in wine and food tourism, and dark sky is really taking off. In my report, I talked about we have had a few what's inbound trade events, which is the wholesale market that you have to follow through in order to sell international trade overseas. And dark sky is definitely something that many people throughout the world are paying attention to and intrigued with. I mean, even the most recent aurora, which was seen mostly from the Southern Hemisphere, from Australia, and even half of Australia to the south, it creates a huge amount of interest across any social media platform right across the world. And people do travel in order to see such phenomenon. And we're lucky to have not lucky, it's actually thanks to this council and Carterton District Council having the foresight to create Dark Sky Reserve here in Wairarapa. And as you all know, there are not too many dark sky reserves, and there are only 2 in New Zealand. And our unique point of difference is that we are easily the most accessible dark sky reserve in the world. You're only an hour from an international airport, only an hour from a capital city. And also, if Mother Nature isn't turning it on for us on that particular night when the tourist is passing through, then we have wonderful tourism infrastructure that sits below with wine and food and hiking and trails and all sorts of activities that people can do. So unlike if you venture into the reserve in South Island, Ariki, Mount Cook, mostly if you don't get to see what you're looking for, then some people are quite disappointed. Our benefit is that means that we've got other opportunities to showcase our people in this region. We as Destination Wairarapa are really pushing that message. It's one of those things, if you say it enough and repeat it enough, measure of success is when somebody repeats it back to you. And that's always a desire and an aim when you're doing marketing and PR activities. And it's starting to be spoken back to us, certainly in New Zealand, but Australia trade market as well. And, hopefully the world before we know it. It's exciting to be on the cusp of this. Destination Wairarapa is a marketing agency, however, we can promote, be successful in that area as long as we want to, as long as we're performing. What we still need is product development. We still need effort put into helping businesses become trade ready. And we only still have one that is that's the Star Safari, who are trade ready. They're Qualmart. They're the only business we still need to do work in that area. And it's just something to consider as we're going forward in economic development. As I said, we can market and we do a good job of doing that. But if we've got nothing to sell, there's only so much you can create demand. Very happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Anna this morning, team?
Great report. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, and congratulations to you, because being #1, as you say, and endless, is no mean feat, and it does speak to the work that you are doing in that space. And I think it certainly qualifies all of the support that we saw come through for your organisation in not so recent, but in recent submissions. So well done. Any questions for Anna?
Well, one thing I also wish to congratulate somebody for, but I'm not entirely sure, is I noticed that the Trust House grant is considerably larger than what?
Oh,
No?
yes, unfortunately, there is a accounting it's not error.
Anomaly.
Yeah, so the auditor, we
Made
received
that.
money in the last financial year, but the way that the funding from Trust House is it's forward. So they put it into this financial year, which means we've got the last half of last year. And what we've actually been told is we're receiving significantly less from Trust House for this.
Well, let me just circle back to where I was going to come from, because picking up your last point about businesses related to the dark sky, it seems to me there are sort of two barriers. One is the one that you mentioned, and the other one is the issue of accommodation and where people stay. And I've wondered whether, in fact, because Trust House have properties and what have you, whether anybody has actually approached them to think about, is there a contribution they can make in the accommodation side of the dark sky environment? So it's really just a question mark.
Yeah, I know that they've got, because the other side of their portfolio is social housing, know that there is a lot of investment in that side and the hospitality side and the support that the Trust House Foundation, which is through the gambling situation. I'm not sure how they balance their books and how it works. So I don't know whether the funding will be available for that sort of stuff. However, they do know, because I also report to them, well, not report to them, give them updates about what we're doing, and they do know our constraints. Just on that point of investment though, it's interesting, in the last 6 months, I could tell you, which I'm not allowed to, probably 6 or 7 different businesses, not just in here, but from people outside wanting to invest into the Wairarapa. They're looking for a sign of confidence, and I don't know what that is, but there is certainly businesses looking at accommodation, activities, all sorts of things. We've just got to continue looking strong, looking confident. And I mentioned in there the need for a regional brand. I'm not calling it a slogan or anything like that, but an identity. I was recently involved in a tourism report. I can't even remember what it was, and it had everybody's logos from each of the different regions. And there was Hawke's Bay Wine Country, there was Taranaki, there was Manawatu, and then there was Destination Wairarapa. It's not the brand of Wairarapa. We need a confident identity, and I'd like to see, and that attracts investment because it acknowledges the people and who sit beneath it and the reason why they live here. There's so much work that's done under it, and I'd like to see a regional brand, and I'd like to see a collective investment strategy.
Well done.
Yeah, well done.
Comments for Anna? No. Thank you very much, Anna. Amazing as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Would you like to join us for business quarterly reporting, please?
Kia ora koutou. It's my pleasure to introduce Tui for those of you, which I don't think there are any of you that don't know Tui. Tui has recently joined the board of Business Wairarapa as representative of Featherston Business Engine. I'd also like to acknowledge Janice McGee. She's recently joined the board on behalf of Martinborough Business Association. So as I've intimated before, Business Wairarapa works as a collaboration rather than a membership organisation. We encourage our local businesses to join Business Wairarapa as a district-wide chamber of commerce through their district-wide business associations and partners such as Destination Wairarapa, and that has exponentially increased our representation across the region. I'll take the report as read. It's a fairly brief report, but that's not undermining the amount of wins that we've had over this last quarter. I would say most significantly this last quarter is the success that we've had in advocating on behalf of our small businesses and to come to a resolution where Business Wairarapa will partner more closely with Wellington NZ, not to subcontract, but for want of a better word, I'll use subcontract to deliver the regional MBS funded Regional Business Partners Program in Wairarapa from Wairarapa. So that's a major win, which we've been advocating for since 2021. We met with Minister Chris Penk. We were invited to Parliament. We spoke directly with him and the Director of Contracts from MB, Glenn McCloy, discussing the needs of small businesses in Wairarapa, how it's very different to the needs of metropolitan areas. We specifically used a case study from Cartel Foods based here in Martin Borough, along with some of the testimonial that we've had from our small businesses that attended our workshops of late. And I'm pleased to say that really is huge for us, is to be able to get that more meaningfully delivered here in Wairarapa going forward. Other couple of key points to point out is our upcoming business summit. I'm sure all of you have purchased your tickets to come to the Wairarapa Business Summit. This year, of course, we have Brad Olsen. He always brings in economic data that's specific to Wairarapa, for Wairarapa, and compared to New Zealand. I really encourage councils to come along and listen to that economic development piece for Wairarapa. Additionally, this year, along with our keynote speakers such as Nigel Latter, Girls from Power Suit and Julia Jones from Agri Women's Development Trust, we've got a panel discussion this year which is about the Wairarapa story, going back to Anna's comment earlier. How do we tell a story for our district-wide businesses, for our districts, and for our region? How do we package that up to make Wairarapa inviting to investors, to bring businesses here and continue to grow our district-wide communities? So we're quite excited about that. What else can I tell you? As I said, we continue on with our business capability for small businesses, designing workshops that are short and tangible and addressed to our SMEs. Really important when over a quarter of our workforce here in Wairarapa is in self-employment, and that's specifically applicable to South Wairarapa. Additionally, we continue to play an active role in our district-wide stakeholder groups. I think on the Dark Skies Forum, the Wairarapa Skills Leadership Group, and Tuharonga Trust, which is committed to attracting skilled health workforce to Wairarapa. So we very much continue to work ground up to advocate for our businesses on behalf of all three of our district councils. Do you want to add anything about this?
Sure. I'll quickly run through. And here I have my community board hat in my bag. I'm wearing this is Wairarapa. It's the engine hat though. Hats. So quickly, we are the newest of the reformed business group, I guess, and a small membership at the moment, around 30, but growing. And we are very conscious that the first order of business for us is around supporting those who are paid up members and making sure they're getting benefit out of it. But there are bigger pieces of the puzzle to think about, as you heard from Anna, as you heard from Nick and I, around what Bigsy would describe as an organising principle, that brand identity, and we have done some work Bigsy on this, but as a group around that unifying principle of being a town of stories for Featherston, which we're working out how that becomes a useful and transferable resource for local business owners to engage with and draw benefit from. So we're looking at that at the moment and hopefully having a resource pack and some support for businesses to engage in that going forward. And we've also talked, I know this is a conversation also with the community board, and I believe the council as well, around how we get better coordinated events strategy across the region, but particularly for Featherston, how we're working at the moment on how we can help business owners be aware of what's coming out, how they can plumb into those events, how they can support them, and how that in turn they can derive benefit from them, you know, so that they link in more cohesively than a number of those events do, which, you know, they're all great for the community, but there are different levels of engagement in the community for those and benefit for the community from those events. And we're also talking about how we, with the support of Business Wairarapa, there's been a lot of conversation and work being done on how we better link the small entities and the business members of these entities to all benefit from Business Wairarapa and each other of the sub-regionals here, how we cross promote events and encourage participation by current non-member business owners, with a view that they can participate as non-members, they wouldn't get the benefits unless they pay up, but that we are actually starting to bring a more cohesive group of business owners together. And I guess, whilst I mentioned we are looking at that support for the members specifically, that we do make sure we consider the economic development and destination management, tourism development side of that. And I think it's very strong. There's a bottom up for supporting business owners to become better at engaging and supporting, but there's also that clear and cohesive, also that comment around having a clear confidence in the region effect, which is about us having a very clear plan across the region for what we're actually doing to support and encourage business owners who are looking to invest in the region. So we're, as a member of the board, certainly if you have good conversations, we're able to start linking the dots behind this. So yeah.
Fantastic. Firstly, congratulations, you've had some amazing ones this quarter. And I think what strikes me most is it's really nice to see you with board support in person. And it is the first time, but I want to acknowledge that that must be really great for you because you've carried a huge amount of weight on your own shoulders throughout this training, and it's really refreshing to see that you are well supported in your role as well. And I know for a fact that the gentleman sitting next to you has a wealth of knowledge to help our small businesses and with envy. So well done, Councillor Fox.
Yeah, your sentence, and congratulations to you on becoming a board member. And remember, I think while you represent Featherston, I'm sure on the board that you take a global picture of the district as a whole, working alongside Nicola. I'm just one quick question about your survey on Auckland return passenger service for what you're doing. Yeah, quite interested in that because obviously there was a meeting today that was scheduled.
It was cancelled.
Yes, that's right.
That survey last year, and it was district-wide, as you can see, in terms of the uptake that came on board. It was highly successful. I printed the summary off after about 600 and something submissions, so we ended up with about 700. People partaking in that survey. It goes without saying that people want a return service to Auckland based at Hood. Currently, Marsden District Council is in conversations. They have been in conversation with Air Chathams for some time.
Yes.
Air Chathams is quite forthright. However, Air Chathams is also seeking some form of funding for it, which of course is not a sustainable model. So the reason that this meeting was postponed is I think Air Chathams were told just to hold off a little bit. Certainly Marsden District Council is intending to put a tender out or request for proposal to other airlines. But certainly it is something that this region really wants, that our businesses want. I've got businesses that would use it several times a week. And of course, it'd be fundamental to our tourism businesses as well to have that service.
Sorry, just going back a little bit in terms of the original concept of Wairarapa Airlines was a good example where I think Alan Stewart was involved with Hansels in those days, and Wairarapa Airlines was formed out of that freight, I guess, between Hansels and Auckland getting to their factory. And obviously the passenger side of the business increased over time, but it was always probably offset a little bit by freight that was leaving the district and coming here. So do you think the timing's right now that there is enough demand for, I mean, Air New Zealand tried it and chose at the end of the day to exit for whatever reason. And do you think the timing's right now?
I do. Air Chathams are looking for a bigger aircraft. Then ideally this is my understanding, I'm not an aviation professional. Let's make that clear. My understanding is they're looking for a bigger aircraft than the runway potentially can have. So there's a bit of toing and froing in identifying the type of aircraft, what will fill it, what it will cost to fill it. But as said, I think there is an opportunity for other airlines to come on board. And there is also an email a couple of weeks ago from a person who's looking to provide a freighting service. So yes, I think there's
Yeah.
Once it's all finished and we can get something happening, I think the rest will follow.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that's good.
Any other questions before we break? No, well done.
If you'd like to come to the summit, I've got a handful of tickets at member early bird prices, so just email.
Did very nice.
Remind us of your dates.
It's 31 July. Yeah. Fantastic, and I look forward to seeing you all there.
Thanks, Nicola. Thank you.
So,
Fun, is it?
Thank you, Jane. We will break for lunch. 30 minutes. I am trying hard to get us back all the time.
Yeah, before two.